Hello, and welcome to Message in the Middle with Marianne. We all know that life is hard, right? It's messy, it's unpredictable, but it can be wonderful all at the same time. My hope is that we can take a deep dive into self-development topics and explore life's lessons through book clubs, conversations, and interviews. And together, we can uncover the lessons that others have already learned to help us navigate this crazy, wonderful ride called life. Hello and welcome to Message in the Middle. I'm your host, Marianne, and today we're talking about reframing our thoughts, expectations, and perceived boundaries as it relates to middle years and beyond. Joining me for this conversation is Ande Lyons. Ande is a Forex founder, a former global startup mentor, a serial podcaster since 2012, and currently the host of the popular Don't Be Caged by Your Age podcast, where Ande helps people dissolve ageist beliefs so they can thrive beyond 65. Through conversations with people who have defied societal norms, shattered age-related expectations, and forged new and unexpected pathways that left them feeling engaged, visible, and fully alive, Ande helps listeners reimagine, repurpose, and rewire their lived experiences for a vibrant life during their Renaissance years. What an intro. Ande, welcome to the show.
I am so delighted to be here, Marianne. And listeners, could you listen to Marianne's voice all day? I could. I love your voice.
All right. So I just have to say, because people say that, but when you hear your own voice, it doesn't sound the way other people hear your voice. But thank you. I will accept that compliment.
I feel so much more grounded, present, here with you. I just anybody having a bad day, listen to Marianne and you're going to get chilled and loved and all the good things.
Oh, thank you so much. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you. And while we're talking about good things, and before we really get into the meat of the episode, I know you have guests typically share their age and where they're from, but their age because you feel pretty strongly about aging out loud. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to ask you to share your age with our listeners.
I'm 67, almost 68 in August, and I'm all about aging out loud. I have found it extremely liberating. And when I came out about my age in the summer of 2022, I think it was, when I turned 66, I had been in the startup ecosystem, Marianne, for decades. And it's a youth-centered world, right?
For sure.
And even the picture of me holding the Route US 66 sign, and I'm looking over it going, and look at my faces. Will you still love me now that you know I'm this old? That's how much I was caught up in the ageist beliefs and all my insecurities and shame. I'm sorry, I'm old. I'm really sorry.
But you're proving, and we're going to talk about it, you're proving over and over and over, you're not.
And it's okay to be old, though. That's the important thing. It's a gift. And the aging out loud allows us to continue to dissolve those ageist beliefs that there's something wrong with us, there's something bad about us because we are older, and especially with women. And we'll talk about gendered ageism in a bit, but it's so important for us to go, yeah, look at this. And also to look in the mirror, Marianne, and go, those lines and barnacles and brown spots are supposed to be there.
Earned, baby, right? All of them. Yeah. And I think for those listeners that come back all the time, most of them know I'm 55. So we were just talking before we hit record. This is a great collaboration because our audience demographics really play well with one another. We, at this age, start thinking a little bit about the things, or a lot of it, about the things that you're so passionate about.
Yeah.
So you consider yourself a serial podcaster. I really want to know what sparked the idea of doing this podcast, Don't Be Caged by Your Age, and why you feel so strongly about it. Was there one thing, or what jumped out at you?
I think it was coming out about my age. At 66, I got tired of people, because people were always saying, you're what? I mean, I didn't think you were a day over 50. Well, that's an ageist remark, right? And I thought, this is something I need to start talking about and using this platform to provide examples, because representation is so important. If you can see it, you can be it. I want to talk to people who said, yeah, I might be 78, but that's not stopping me, right? I have new dreams. I have opportunities I want to pursue, while at the same time easing the fear and anxiety and apprehension in those folks who were in their 50s thinking about the clock striking midnight on that milestone age, which means, we're done with you. See you, bye. Go out to pasture. And I'm a firm believer pastures are for horses and other animals only, not humans, and that we have so much more to give. Now, you're always going to find the radical over 70, a rock climber, parachute jumper, doing crazy things. But I'm talking to the folks who decided to write a book, to become a speaker, to share some passion, who took the time to figure out what fueled their passion so they could go out and find something that was in alignment with their personality and perhaps fueled their pocketbook. Because when you mention the word retire, first of all, the stats tell you 7 out of 10 folks in their 50s, pre-retirees, are planning on working. And it's not just about the money. It's about staying connected. It's about finding ways to continue to be fully expressed, right? Nobody wants to become invisible. It's an awful feeling, but that's what society and institutions, our corporations, are saying. They're saying, you, at the age of 50, we're not going to invest in you anymore. We're not going to send you off to learn new things because basically, we don't believe that you have any more ambition. Well, ambition is ageless. So this is what I was seeing in myself too, and learning new things. Come on, I do all sorts of things that are not age appropriate. And when I wrote the article, when I came out, I said, when I turned 50, I thought that was it. Time to hang up my entrepreneurial tiara and call it a day. Entrepreneurship is for younger folks, right?
Wrong.
16 years later, I've had 2 more businesses.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's so cool because I think that we do get hung up in these ideas. And while many of us do go through that period of sort of, I hate to say winding down, I'm going to say changing focus, right? You finally come to the point, and this is a lot of the people that I talk to at this period in their early 50s, like they're finally at a period where life's gotten quiet. Their kids are grown if they had kids. Their jobs, they've either parted ways with their long-term job or they've taken a role that's not as demanding, or they're just really settled into their life, and they finally have a chance to say, wait, how did I get here? And like, what do I want to do now with the rest of my life, right? And I think that's where it starts getting really exciting. And for those that are still working, you can still do some of these exciting things on the side, and that's okay. But I think getting the message out there that really you can do anything. It's so great.
It is so great. You hit the nail on the head, Marianne, with what you have energy for. So when I had Judith Kernick on the show, she's a very well-known executive transformation coach. So she helps those high performers who have been really caught in that hamster wheel of who they are and over-identifying with what they've been doing professionally, the attorneys, the folks who have really the C-suite folks as well. She helps them transition. She called this way of being the energy portfolio. So just like you have an investment portfolio, how are you using your energy portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So that's where the real transformation starts happening as you enter the 60s and late 50s, but primarily the early 60s. And you're starting to ask those questions. Who would I be?
Yes.
Without this job, without this role as mom, without this role, fill in the blank, and doing the deep dive so that you can look ahead for 20, 30 years. I mean, longevity is happening, folks. We've got great medicine. People are taking better care of themselves. So having this understanding that you can still get up and be engaged in a really good gig, but it might be a 24-hour-a-week gig.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And I love you've used the phrase, I think you grabbed it from somebody else. I'm not going to remember who, but it's rewire versus retire. And I loved that because it really is. It plays right into that energy portfolio. And you don't have the energy for some of that hamster wheel stuff that you did for years and years. I can raise my hand. That was me. And once you get that moment where you take a breath and you can separate and say, that isn't really who I am.
Right.
That is what I did, right? Which is a tough exercise. But once you can do that and you can start rewiring, reprioritizing, really looking within, I kind of get on a soapbox, but the magic happens there. That's when the magic really happens.
It does. And you would love that book. I interviewed the author, Jerry Settler, but she wrote the book, Don't Retire, Rewire. You would especially love it, Marianne, because it's filled with exercises in there. Those probing questions you need to ask yourself. I was going to turn around because I thought it was on my bookshelf, but my husband's using it right now because he loves it. And it's those questions that help you evolve, that help you go, oh, well, what does drive me?
Yes.
I mean, really, if you have the day stretching ahead of you, what drives you? And what we've learned from the World Health Organization is that retirement has a lot of downside because people have stopped, which is great. They've been praying for this day and they maybe have been financially saving for this day. But all of a sudden they're sitting at home going, yeah, now I just had 2 months off, did whatever I wanted. That's great. But now what?
Yeah. Yeah.
For
sure.
And it's hard.
It is hard. I'm going to put a link to that book because when you mentioned it, and the way you describe it, it makes me reminded that I think for many of us, we struggle with connecting to some of those things. We're so out of touch with our true selves that exercise of trying to figure out who we would be if we weren't doing that thing we've always done, I think that's typically pretty challenging. So having some templates and some questions that kind of drive you down that path, that's a really great tool I think a lot of people can utilize.
Absolutely. Now, my husband loves to putz around the house. He's great at fixing things and he wants to. I have very little domestic goddess in me. So what drives me is not anything in the house.
And that's
really
okay.
hard.
We're all different, right?
Maybe some of your listeners can relate. Let me know because it's hard. And women, of course, are always identified as the home and the nurturers and all of that. And I think I missed that when they were handing it out. I'm really good at hiring.
Hey, it's really good to know ourselves, right? We can't all be good at everything. I want to go to the fact that you have reinvented yourself so many times. So 4 different businesses, multiple podcasts, consulting roles, all these things. And some of them, I will say all of them successful, but in different ways. Some of them probably not like you would have pictured them ending, let's put it that way, right? But you continue to just keep doing it, keep reinventing, keep going out there. I want to know if you have any advice for people that struggle with fear of failure, imposter syndrome, all the things that kind of keep us stuck when we maybe have an idea, but we aren't quite sure if we should take a step.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I often introduce myself. Hello, my name is Ande. I've been unemployable since 1992.
Yeah.
I always say, a friend of mine who was very big in HR would look at me and do the wand down my body saying, we don't hire this, Ande, sorry. I'm like, thanks.
Yeah, it is a compliment.
Yeah. And I've been fired from so many jobs. Oh my gosh. But so launching businesses really became reluctantly for me what I ended up doing. And so what I have learned, and I have a video for that, is that no matter what happens, you never lose when you start a business. And you definitely have a greater chance of success as an older entrepreneur. In fact, the stats show that folks launching a business in their late 50s, early 60s have a 3 times greater chance of success than someone in their 30s. Just saying. And why is that? Because we might make mistakes, but we're not going to really blow it up. We've had enough experience. But also, it's a wonderful opportunity to, it's the best personal development program out there. You're going to tap into parts of yourself that you never would have found as an employee.
And may not want to find, but you still got to do the work. So that's okay.
You do. But it's not failure. It's finding out what you want and don't want, what you like and don't like. So for example, there was a female attorney. She retired. Everybody loved her landscaping in her home. They said, oh, you could be a great landscaper. How many of you listeners have heard someone say to you, oh, you would be great at that, baking bread or landscaping or whatever, hair, nails. And at the end of the day, that may be a passion of yours, assembling flowers, right? Things like that. But is it really the fulfilling work that you want to do? And that's what you find out. So she found out when she started her landscaping business, like, oh, hell no, I don't like this at all. Where are my people? Where are people? This is too isolating, right?
Yeah.
So It's okay to pull on a thread, try it out, invest some money in it. It's okay to lose money, folks. It's an investment to find out what's important and what's not important, what you want to do, what you don't like to do. And then also, you're developing skills that are transferable. You may transfer them to your next gig that you might launch, which is perfectly okay,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or you may take those skills back to a company that wants you for now this up-leveled person that you are. You have gained much more insights on how to get things done, create magic, whatever it is. And so you become more hireable. So I always encourage folks for the entrepreneur journey. It's not for everyone, but boy, it's the best experience that you'll have, and you will never, ever, ever fail. You're just going to learn so much about yourself.
Well, and I think too, it doesn't have to be about starting a new business only, right? I think even at this age, at our middle years when we're exploring stuff or beyond, I think it can be hobbies too. I just think one of the things that I've learned along this path, and I've heard other people say, and it's just such a great thing to keep in mind and reframe yourself, is allowing yourself to be a novice. Because I think so many of us have been so good at what we do for so many years that we get hung up in the, I don't know how to be a fabulous writer, or I don't know how to be a, artist that can sell work in a studio. Who cares? Pick up the paintbrush and see if you like it. And maybe it'll just be this watercolor that only you can love. And that's okay if you love it. But I think we get hung up in the, I have to be an expert, right? And
especially men, because they're programmed to win, right? So they said, oh, well, I would play golf, but I wish I'd learned it when I was 18, right? And I wish I'd been playing it since I was a kid. No, we can learn new things. This is what's so important about aging with agility and adaptability, is to understand that you can learn new things. And one of the things, too, that got me talking about ageism was, again, in the startup industry, I would often hear, because I was either a pitch event judge, or I hosted a monthly pitch event here in Boston for 3 years where founders came in and pitched their business ideas. And I'd hear them say, explain your business as if you were talking to your grandmother. And of course, my hand would go up, excuse me, hello? We've been building tech companies and coding since the 70s, knock it off. But boy, is there, and again, ageism is one of the most socially acceptable discriminations out there. And it happens all the time for folks that are older. And it's especially around technology. You can learn new things. It may take a little longer. I know I was hearing a woman who went back to school in her late 80s, and she said her biggest concern was being able to retrieve the information, right? She would take it in, and then go, oh, where did it go? But there are tools that help you to retrieve better and all of that. And there's just no shame in showing up and trying new things and exploring and, pulling on those threads. So I love what you just shared, Marianne, about that, whether it's a passion, a hobby, whatever that looks like. If it lights you up, it's a win.
Yeah. And it's okay to try different things until you find one that does, because sometimes you don't know. So just take a step towards it is what I like to say. I heard you say, or I saw in an article that you were quoted saying that a few years back, you learned life happens for you, not to you.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, without sounding like toxic positivity, everybody, okay, it's how I have chosen to frame my life and the stories I tell myself about life, because victimhood never works. And the human journey is just filled with potholes, stumbles, all the things. Every day I'm not in pain and things are like moving forward. Okay. I'm like, it's a win.
Yeah.
But we tend to think that life is supposed to be this big bundle of joy, and it isn't. So I see the things that happen as a way to go, to stop, to reflect, to observe, and then say, how does this make me a better person? How does this give me a deeper understanding of humanity? How does it help me understand the fragility of being human, right? And it gives me deeper empathy for anybody else walking through really tough times, so that I may not know exactly what their tough time is like, but I've had my own, so I can at least hold their hand through that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's what do I learn from this? And certainly there are plenty of times where I take that and file it under T for trash, because it was just a stumble that happened because I'm alive.
Yeah, because you're human.
And also looking for the ways that you can have a deeper level of emotional literacy, really understanding your emotions, why they're there, how valid they are. And also, I used to always talk about how having our fears and doubts are so important. And the more you try to push them away, the louder they'll get.
Yeah.
So I always use making a chocolate cake reference, right? You got your mixer out, you're putting on all the ingredients. But if you don't put that baking soda in there, it's going to fail, that chocolate cake. Now, if you've ever tasted baking soda on your tongue, that is just foul. It is not right. It's awful. How is this helping my cake, right?
Yeah.
It's an important ingredient. Same thing with fear, doubt, and the bad times that happen to us. And yes, certainly it looks like some people get more of those bad times than we do, or we feel like maybe we had a longer list of crap that was going to happen to us than others. Don't compare because you're just going to end up in despair. So understand that if you hold the hand of the trauma and you're holding the hand of the fear and the doubt and the voices in your head, and you just say, look, I got this. I hear you. I love you. You're able to blend that cake up and, put it in the oven and hopefully at the right temperature. But it's a way of understanding that they blend into the good that you have in your life. And then they're really important for this beautiful cake that's going to be you. And that's why I use the word delicious a lot. And so it may sound that life happens for you, not to you, can be very toxic positivity in one level, because some people tend to just ignore all the bad times. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Go there emotionally, go deep into that pain and that grief. Find out what you need to learn about yourself, because in my humble opinion, we're here on our soul journeys as well as our human journeys, and just a bigger way of being in the world. And it just really makes us more relatable and kinder for each other and to each other.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I often say our mess becomes our message. So I think we all go through different things. That was really behind me starting this podcast, is because the more we can share and relate to one another and help each other with just validating that, life is messy, all of it, but especially perimenopause, menopause, just those middle years are challenging, but also can be fantastic and an opportunity. And all of it together, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, it's all what makes this crazy ride called life.
It really is. And it's what inspired me to do a 30-episode series called Your Ink Story. And I interviewed people with tattoos. I mean, I had maybe one or two that just had one, but what I had been learning over the years, asking people, would you be willing to share your ink story with me, was this deep human connection. Because there was like, well, this is the names of my kids, and this is the dog I lost, and this is when I overcame cancer, and this is when I got sober.
Yeah.
Those are all human trials and tribulations that we all have, no matter what our color, our race, our gender, our anything. We're human first. So we're all trying to figure this stuff out together. So, finding those ways that we are connected, not divided.
I love that. When I think about you and your personality and your bio, the part I didn't read to people, or the part that came to my mind that wasn't there to read, was how warm and open and just this big, I don't know, spirit of fun and welcoming. And that's who you are. And I was lucky enough to get to meet you about a month ago for a New England podcasters meetup that you started. And hopefully they're hearing your spirit and can kind of get a feel for the person you are. But in real life, that is you. You really are glowing, and you're that happy person that just makes everybody feel welcome. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you.
But I also think you exhibit this super high level of confidence. And the way you started that meetup, the New England podcasters meetup, and got us all together and are still sort of growing that bootstraps effort there. It's just another indication or another sign of the confidence that you have, because you see a need and you're like, whoop, I'll do it. Nobody else is. And not everybody does that. Do you think you were born with that confidence and that, like, I don't know, drive to just go wherever you want to go and fill whatever gaps you want to fill?
Oh my gosh. I do believe that something can be in your DNA package a little, right? Can be in there somewhere, because it certainly was not the home I grew up in. The home I grew up in was like, don't ever do anything that you might make a mistake at, because we don't tolerate mistakes.
That's actually a good message, right? Because that proves can go outside of what you had been brought up with.
Right.
Yeah.
Indoctrinated with. And yes, and being bullied as a kid for 3.5 years, severe bullying made me just become more of an individual, because and not try to be constantly looking for the approval of others. That said, what about the whole, what happens if you hold a party and no one shows up?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I live with that all the time.
So you hide it well.
But so I just go, well, we're going to do it anyway, everybody, because I'll be here.
Yeah.
But what I was looking for, and I think this is also really important, Marianne, is that sometimes we can't find a community that we want to be with, right? And we can get on Meetup and try and go all these things. No, I don't know this. They're not talking about this, or I don't know what they're doing. But you can launch your own community. And even if it's a party of one or two, it is a community. People are gathering over a topic, an idea, whatever. So I had been thinking about this for almost a year, that I really wanted to do this for Boston and New England. And because I noticed all the podcast folks were going around the country, I'm like, hello, you're not visiting New England. Why is that? And so I said, well, I can't find anything. I'll go ahead and start it. But I also love podcasters. So I knew that no matter who showed up, I would be in heaven. And that's from being part of a lot of other communities over the last 60 years. And, and the startup community is really challenging in that startup founders are very highly focused on building their business. And if you can't help them, get out of the way.
Yeah.
And while it's great for founders to be in community as a coach and a mentor and a support system, there's not a lot of reciprocity. And so with podcasters, I knew that it would be just so delicious that we were all talking about things that were meaningful and important to us and had these incredible experiences and conversations. So I said, I really want to do this, but I don't want to do it alone. And one of my Podfest attendees, Nick Pavlitas, happened to put out a note after Podfest, hey, anybody want to get together? And I was like, yeah, I do. And this is my vision. And he'll be the first to tell you, I was just looking for a little howdy do, but I didn't really do much. But for me, just having that person in the wings really helped me do what I can already do naturally, but not naturally. I've learned over the years how to hold an event. I'm still very frightened and concerned nobody will show up and why bother and all of those things. But at the same time with podcasters, I mean, listeners, listen to Marianne, right? I mean, like who wouldn't want to hang out and hug in real life with Marianne? So, and a lot of times, folks can't make it monthly, but at least I have it monthly so that folks could maybe make it quarterly, right?
Yeah.
So it just sort of all came together. And I just think it's just a powerful message about if you can't find a community, create it. And I think that what is that quote out there? Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid.
And they did.
And it did.
I think there's other messages there too, though, because you talked about not being confident and doing it anyway. And I think that's a really big message that I like to reinforce, because I think being scared and doing things messy, and I talk about that. That's how I started this. And, some would say I still do this, and that's okay.
Messy is good.
Messy's okay. And again, it's back to shedding that. So many of us have had this perfection model or desire to do everything perfectly, which we know doesn't exist. So I think just really hearing you say that you did it anyway and you do it scared, and as long as one person shows up, those are all great messages. I think they're all great messages. So thank you.
You're welcome. And think of situation comedy, right? I happen to be a fan of situation comedy. So that's why I tend to find humor in things. I've been in so much messy things. It's just, there's a lot of stories around that. And it is true that the more times you can hang out with uncertainty and lack of confidence, you get a little better at it the next time. It still doesn't mean you can't be traumatized by it. You're still going to be walking with the trauma of, oh boy, that was a disaster. And I've got lots of those stories. But I think it's also being gentle and having grace with yourself, right? Because I'm a Leo. It's all about how it looks. So with and so it can be that can be getting in our way, like, oh, I just don't want people to laugh at me. So that's why I turn to the situation comedy and say, well, I can find something funny in the fact that nobody showed up or something,
Yeah.
right? Or it was so messy. It was like, how did you even do this or why? But if you're getting something out of it, and so I know we're all tuned into what's in it for them, but it's also good to be tuned into what's in it for us.
Yes.
And that's okay to be selfish about that. I want a community that I enjoy talking to, that are doing meaningful things, that are interesting and fascinating. Wow, you can't get any better than podcasters.
I would agree. I would agree with that completely. All right. Well, let's go back for a minute to the work you're doing with your podcast and the message that you're trying to get out there. We'll, of course, put all your links in the show notes, and hopefully people will tune in and hear the variety of guests that have been on the show. But what are some of the biggest takeaways you've had since you've started this show now that really resonate with you and that might resonate with our listeners here today?
Well, one of my favorite episodes is with Charlotte. She's 65, always wanted to model. We're not talking, when we've seen those aging models, that tall, thin, and maybe they didn't get to model when they were younger, but they still, you look at them and go, that's a model. That is not Charlotte. And Charlotte had in her 50s, her big adventure was creating a pole dancing company. And so she learned how to be brave there, but she wanted to model. And she wanted to model clothes that had been upcycled,
Isn't that great?
renewed, reused, whatever you want to call it. But also, I know she has some height to her, but she doesn't have that usual coiffed model stature and look. She is so much fun. And she just started. And then she went to a how to walk the catwalk and upped her game, right? She learned new things, how to move, how to model, how to do a video, a short video, a reel with an outfit, all of those things. Well, do you know she just got signed by a model agency? Like, to me, that's just amazing.
Good for her.
Or there was Mildred, who came from a family of 17 children in Alabama. And this is from the same mom and dad. Okay. She was number 3. What a life. She got out of that, got herself educated, married a few times, her own children. And she wanted to tell people this story of what life had been like for her as a woman of color, growing up in Alabama and picking cotton with her grandmother, all of that. So at the age of, I think, 68, she went back and got her master's in creative writing.
Wow.
Because she knew she wanted to write a book. Well, she's almost graduated, right? And she's in a writing group, and they're said, well, nowadays you have to have a platform. She's like, what's a platform?
Yeah.
And so they said, we have to do something like a podcast and start doing your social media in order for publishers to be interested. Okay. And she's like, okay. She started a podcast, My Cotton Patch Moment, which is those moments when you say, I'm not doing that anymore.
Oh my goodness.
And her voice, oh, she's like, yeah, I could listen to her all day. And she tells the most wonderful stories. But this helped her, getting her degree in creative writing, helped her have the confidence and the skill set she needed. And, a lot of times you don't need that education. You just need to take some classes and, and work on your writing. But she needed that in order to give her the confidence to write her book and get it published at the age of 72.
Wow. It's just one after the other. And, I've been listening, so it's just one after the other of these stories of people that are just living their best life. And a lot of them in ways that we just wouldn't have envisioned possible at, I'm going to say, their age with quotes, because part of this message and part of your, growing older out loud is to really also make us reflect, right? We don't even realize some of us have these blocks or these ideas associated with age in our own minds that maybe are preventing us. So these are great examples to be able to see.
Yeah. Too old. Yeah, I can't do that. I'm too old. Where does it say that? In writing? Where? And, I always ask people to share a few highlights from their decades of lived experiences, because I only interview folks who are 60 and over, because again, that representation.
Yeah.
And you hear the lost all our money, had this business blow up,
Yes.
Lost a child, all the things. But, they wanted to do one more thing. Look at Julie. She was a mother at what? 15, 16, I don't know. And then she was a grandmother at 38. She was a rock band lead singer.
Yeah. And now, for those that haven't listened, she's a private investigator. It's amazing. And is debunking all the, issues around mobility and, with work from home
Right.
and online. Now you can do so many more things.
Oh my gosh. One of my favorite moments was with Sandra Allison. And again, I'm always having to check my ageist beliefs. This is a woman who got fired when she was 58 and she tried to get a job and she couldn't. Ageism. She said, well,
Common.
yep. She said, dang it, I'm going to learn how to do the best resume and get past all these different things that knock me out of the system. And she had a tech background, but she became a brilliant resume writer, especially for folks who were over 50, and started her own resume writing business. And so we're talking about that. She can't see out of one of her eyes. She can't walk well because of arthritis. This is what happens to many folks who are aging. That's another reason they say, oh, I'm too old. So anyway, she's telling us stories and she goes, well, I'm a gamer. And so I think, what, bridge? Bingo? So bad. I have my youngest son as a game designer, but boy, no, Sandra, no. She goes, Andy, I was gaming, like shooting zombies when we had to do punch cards and mainframes. And now, 4 hours a night, that's what I do for my leisure. I shoot zombies and I'm a big time gamer. But I went there like, bridge?
Well, two things. Fabulous for her. And also, I think it's okay to acknowledge that we have these blocks and that we have this programming that we have to check at the door. We have to check ourselves constantly because it's there, whether we want to say it out loud or not. It's there. So let's start breaking this down.
But you had that wonderful guest too. I loved it. The frantic chin plucker, Marie Tom. Was that
yes.
Folks, when you look in the mirror, I mean, people talking about, oh, I really have to have self-love in the 30s and 40s. I go, oh, wait till you see what starts happening. You enter your 60s. This is just wrong. It's just a whole nother level of self-love. And I shared that short with Andy McDowell, where an Italian journalist asked her, how does it feel to lose your beauty? And she was like, say what?
Yeah.
My beauty comes from within. So that's the reminder, is that your beauty comes from within. The body is what's housing you. And some of us might have been extreme athletes when we were younger, or just genetically are predisposed to a bunch of junk that happens to the body. The thing is that there's no real cream that's going to make you look younger, nothing. It's going to always be your vibe. It's how you are in the world and your ability to stay enthusiastic about what you can do.
Or as you say, how you glow.
You glow.
How you glow. I want to go back to Marie Tom, because Marie Tom, Yvonne Vincent, and Sarah Stenton, they're three peas in a pod, and they all focus on, or their work is all about, menopause. And they started making light of and comedy around midlife and menopause. And they all, just similar to you, found this void where people weren't talking about these topics, or people weren't validating each other's concerns, and they all just happened to be super funny naturally. And now they're out in their mid 50s and beyond, and they're authors, writing plays, being in plays, having stand-up comedy skits. Sarah's going around doing these menopause tours. It's similar, right? It's the same story. They just leaned in at that age where many of us just take a step back and reevaluate our life and what we're doing, what we want to do, what we want our legacy to be. And they're having a blast.
So great. I went into menopause early because I had my second child at the age of 42 and a half. And what I learned later was when you have a child that late, you're often pushed into perimenopause. And this is a topic, forget menopause. Perimenopause is where you're 1 minute homicidal, the next minute suicidal, all the things. And here I am raising young children. I was putting myself in timeout versus them. Mommy's going into timeout now. But it's such an important topic. And I remember feeling so frustrated that, wow, I got my period when I was 10 or 11. And now this, like, that wasn't enough all the years and birth and babies and all the things every month. And now I have to go through this body changing, psycho changing craziness. This is wrong. Women have it so hard.
So hard. I've definitely had multiple experts, a couple of doctors on about that topic, because I feel strongly about the fact that I don't think there's enough information out there, to your point about perimenopause. And in Europe, it's getting better. They're doing it I've learned this while I was doing research. They're starting to have programs in corporate America and such through their HR, but we just don't have it here. People don't talk about it. I mean, I didn't grow up with friends telling me about it, or in my 20s and 30s and 40s hearing about it. So
it's like women's sexuality.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that.
Mhm.
And I had a platform called Bring Back Desire. One of my businesses, it was a 21 plus website helping long-term couples stay tuned in and turned on, because intimacy is important. But how do women get there? I mean, we know how guys get there. It's, they're visual, but we're emotional.
Mhm.
So these are tough conversations that are important to have, because they're an important part of our human experiences as women. So I love that you're having those conversations, Marian, that you're helping women prepare for this time in their life where there's a lot of transformation. And, it's so interesting when the clock strikes midnight on 30, the stories we tell ourselves of what we should have done by then.
Yeah.
40, oh my gosh, if you're not married with a kid or two, you're a total loser, supposedly, right?
Right.
Turning 50, what, you haven't become a Nobel Prize winner yet? What's the matter with you? I mean, there's amazing.
Beginning of the end. It's the beginning of the end at 50, right? That's what we think.
And what I'm learning from interviewing folks is that there is almost like this natural depression that happens as you age into the 60s. And a lot of people have had to walk through some important parts of themselves. The men, I don't have very many men on the show, but they openly talk about how it was a tough time for them and what they crawled through and learned, and the women as well. So we have to understand that we need people like Marianne who are talking and helping us find ways to navigate these transformative times that are so important, because as Cyndi Lauper says, it ain't over till it's over.
I love that. And thank you. I think the transformation work that happens in your middle years is certainly that which will frame up those later years, right? Those Renaissance years, as you guys call them. And I love that term, that reframing, and set us up for really believing we can do whatever we want, which is the work you're doing. So I appreciate all the work you're doing. But this has been a love fest, of course.
Time flew by.
Time flew by. Thank you so much for joining me. We will put all the links out in the show notes. Anything you want to leave with our audience before we close down the show for the day?
Anytime, listeners, that you're sitting there thinking that you can't do something, I'm just going to tell you, don't be caged by your age.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, Marianne.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Message in the Middle with Marianne. If you enjoyed the podcast, please take a minute to share it and write a review, as it helps bring new listeners to our audience. If you'd like to keep the conversation going between episodes, please join us at Facebook group Message in the Middle with Marianne.